Hello folks, welcome to Gelvin Valley, map made for Farming Simulator 15 by a wonderful mapper, Wild Wes. Let's cycle out to our machines as we continue our process of planting. I think that's everything. Oh yes, we got some fuel out to the field. Crank that puppy up. We're in the middle of planting barley. Oh, and before I forget, let me turn on my timer. From good old Eustace Farmer. Know when to quit talking. You can hear it tick, tick, tick. Always scares the bejeebers out of me. Anyway, we are pulling a steep hill here. Let me get back over. Here we go. You know, I just got done recording some episodes over on an older version, older still, of Farming Sim, and the commands kind of change sometimes between the versions of the game, so I'm trying to remember how to do it in here. I'll hit 3, silly. That's right, you hit 3, and then I think 1 and 2, like, increase the speeds, maybe? I can't remember. At least in here, regulate your speed. I know the other version I was thinking of, Farming Sim 11, what it does if it feels you're going too fast is it just unattaches equipment from your tractor. I don't know why it does it that way, it just does. I guess they figure if you're going too fast, we're going to take you out. As I record this, it's a Sunday afternoon. Just resting, relaxing here. This past week, I think in one of these episodes somewhere, I mentioned taking a fishing trip upcoming. Maybe that's been several episodes ago. I can't remember. I keep notes on some of these episodes and throw them out there on the internet, but a lot of times I forget what I mentioned in them. I'm sure you all forget it too. You're probably lucky if you can forget whatever drivel I have going on in here. Oops, I didn't mean to turn that off. But we had planned a fishing trip for some time actually. I live in Oregon in the U.S., and the central part of the state, the mountains, really there's lakes and streams and rivers and whatnot all over the state where we can go fishing or that kind of stuff. But my sons are fond of an area in central Oregon, a particular lake called Crane Prairie. It's kind of a large flat area, if you will. I wonder if they logged it years ago, and it's called a reservoir. I think they built a dam kind of at one end of it, and it's very shallow lake, so it's great for bass and rainbow trout. There's a fair number of them in there. But I really don't know. Oh my, I'm doing a terrible job driving with my keyboard driving skills. I really don't know what kind of a reservoir it is. You know, it doesn't seem like it could hold all that many acre feet of water for irrigation when the average depth, well, this is just eyeballing it. I've looked at some depth charts for a number of lakes here in Oregon that they have the data for, and some of them are quite deep. This one here is not, and I think the deepest that I saw on the chart was like a whopping 17 feet. So we're not talking anything too deep here. And probably average, you know, what it has is it has some streams going through there. I don't remember which rivers, not streams, rivers. And so there's river channels that are cut into the lake. So those are the deeper areas, if you will. And then the rest of it was, like I say, they logged it and they left a whole bunch of tree snags. Well, they weren't called, I mean, they're trees, stumps and whatnot that became snags when the whole area was flooded. So you have areas of the lake that are literally just a couple feet deep. And there's lots of areas, out where you're fishing where you're under 10 feet deep most of the time. So you can generally see the bottom almost everywhere you go. You can see fish sometimes in there. And it's been a great place for fishing kind of traditionally. And I know I went there as a kid. My father was real fond of the lake himself. And I have a memory of my dad back in the day on Crane Prairie. He always did a little fly fishing, and I would say it's probably my father's favorite pastime, fishing, but it's something he hasn't been able to even do all that much of, the busyness of life and some things he has going on. But I know when he has time, he really enjoys going fishing, and this is one of his favorite spots. The irony, or the unfortunate part, if you will, is he happens to be deathly allergic to fish. It would be an anaphylactic reaction, where it would stop his breathing. So I know that's something we've had to be really careful of over the years to make sure he doesn't accidentally even eat fish or fish-type product. I know growing up, Mom, whenever we had fish at home, she would cook it outdoors so he couldn't, so it wouldn't be in the house, where he would smell it and potentially have a reaction. And I think she had a whole different set of pots and pans or whatever that she would use, or mainly a pan, that she would cook fish in, and she wouldn't cook anything else that, he would eat, just to try to keep him safe. But anyway, he enjoys fishing, and as long as he doesn't eat him or handle him overly much, he's fine. But I have this memory of him in Crane Prairie when he would take us up there kind of this time of year, which is early October. What is today? The 1st of October. In the past, right up, I think they closed the lakes up there somewhere mid-October. You always roll the dice a little bit being up there this time of year because it could snow. This past week when we were up there, it rained heavily, and it was a cold rain, and you could tell in the higher elevations it was picking up some snow. But this was a time of year that he would have time, and that's when he would take us up there. And anyway, I'm kind of getting diverted from my story. He's like I said, he does a little fly fishing. He's always enjoyed the fly pole. And I just remember we were out there, my father had 5 of us boys. I don't think we all packed onto the boat at a time, but that's back when we were small, so he would be in the back running the boat, of course, and we would be sprinkled throughout the boat, taking up space. And I remember we had just a little bit of time. We picked up anchor and we're moving. I think we had to head in for supper maybe, and we had just a little bit of time left. So he went over to this one particular snag. I don't think it was picked for any reason. It was just there. And there was another boat fishing kind of off a little ways. They were maybe, 50 yards off. So not a huge distance. They were fairly close by. So we park over next to this snag, and Dad pulls out his fly pole, and bam, bam, 4 times in a row, he catches these beautiful fish. And I don't even remember if we kept them. I think in those days we kept all of them that we could so we could eat them. I mean, he wouldn't, but, us kids would, and Mom. And then, almost like it was planned, we were out of time. Dad puts away his fly pole, fires up the boat, just this, actually it's the same boat that we have now that we use this past week. Fires up the boat, and we head on out of there. Well, while he was doing it, the entire time, he caught the interest of this other boat. They were catching nothing. And I just remember laughing when we left. As soon as Dad moved the boat, we saw these other guys move their position to come over to be exactly where our boat was. And who knows? Maybe maybe they caught something, maybe they didn't. I just thought it was kind of funny that they did that. I can't remember if I mentioned in the last video, I am not a fisherman, not at all. You know, I did a little bit of it as a kid, and again on nice Oregon lakes. And maybe I'm just a fair weather fisherman. Maybe I can't handle fishing or don't have enough patience for it if there isn't enough action going on. Maybe just a whole host of maybes. It just never caught my interest to where, you know, I just dreamt about going. I couldn't wait to go. It was more kind of the thoughts like, oh, now we gotta go sit out here and do nothing for a long period of time. We're not gonna catch anything. I don't know, I was kind of always just pessimistic about it. What I should have done, in retrospect, as a kid, instead of seeing it as a fishing outing, I should have seen it as an outing with my father and my brothers. That would have been a healthier way to look at things. Instead, it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm not really enjoying this out here, but I'll stick around because I do enjoy the camping stuff back by the tent or cabin, whatever we had at the time. So it's almost like that becomes wasted space, if you will. So I know I've tried to change my attitude on that when it's with regard to my sons. And this time here, I didn't end up going out there with them. But if it was just me and those two, and if my wife was there, she probably wouldn't go out. She doesn't have any interest in it either. I would go out on the boat. I wouldn't fish. You know, I might even have a book with me, but I would go out there just to be with them and treat it as a father-son outing more so than a fishing trip. I don't know if that makes sense. It's maybe an attitude adjustment, but I wish I could show both lights. But I don't know. Yeah, just looking back, as all of us do, a certain amount of, you know, when you mature and you reflect on your past actions or whatever, and yeah, I wish I'd have just looked at them a little bit differently. But it is what it is. I just wish my dad could taste fish. He could taste it, but then he would die. Come on, tractor. Do I not have the differential lock set up? I know I have my diff lock in. This is just pulling hard. Yeah, I think maybe what I need to do is not plant so close to the edge. I could have some dickens of a time pulling when the ground is uneven the way it is. And there's a lot of lakes in central Oregon. Come on, tractor. This is one whale of a hill. And I have a puny little tractor. What I need is a real tractor to pull this hill. Right now I am paying for being so cheap, but everybody can see my bank account. I don't have much money, so I don't even know if it would let me rent a bigger tractor right now or not. I think the next pass will be a little bit easier as soon as I get away from this pesky edge. There we go. Yeah, it just doesn't like the uneven ground. There, much better. But there are so many lakes we could go to, but for whatever reason, this one here has long been kind of a family favorite. Now my boys, they just love it. There's a few that we've gone to over the years, but they keep returning to this one here. And I'm not sure why. You know, I'm not a fisherman, so I don't totally understand the appeal of this particular bit of water. But I imagine it's like a lot of things, you know, where it takes time even to learn a particular lake, to learn what the fishing there is like, to figure out where a good spot may be, and just learn the habits, learn the channels. We do have a fish finder, but I think my boys use it primarily for depth finding, as it tells you kind of the shape of the channel underneath. Although a lot of times you can see it. It's just a type of lake, this one in particular, where it could be even a little dangerous if you're not careful and don't know where you're going. You know, first thing you would hit a snag and lose a propeller on your boat, and then you'd be in a world of hurt and have to row to shore. So I know they have that tool to help them. It's actually situated on what's called the Cascade Lakes Highway, Cascade for Cascade Mountains. It's just south of Bend, Oregon. Like, you can get to it going out of Bend. And it just takes you on a circuit of a number of lakes. You know, right at the top, I think, is Sparks Lake. Eventually there's Lava Lake, Little Lava, the Cultus Lake. I think there's a Hosmer Lake in there, Elk Lake. Then you get to Crane Prairie. There's a Wickiup Reservoir, Davis Lake. I don't know if there's a single fish in Davis. It's kind of another shallow lake, and it's sitting right at the edge of some volcanic lava, old lava, if you will. And Wickiup, I think, I remember fishing in there as a kid also. It was, but it's so empty now. And I realize it's towards the tail end of summer, but we've had a lot of fires here the past couple of years, and I've heard the firefighters use Wickiup kind of as their go-to reservoir. Maybe it's easy to come in there and dip water out. You would never do that in Crane Prairie. It's just too shallow, and there's too many snags. You try to come in there with some equipment, you get all snarled up in a hurry. Whereas Wickiup, I think, is a little bit more open, but it's down so far. And I just don't remember it being down so far when I was a kid, and we could fish clear back in the channels, and it was a bona fide lake. And now it's just kind of sad to see it sitting kind of empty. Reminds me of down south, like in Arizona and Nevada, where the Colorado River comes through, and you have Hoover Dam and Lake Mead behind it, which, the incoming snowfall isn't enough. Oh, achievement unlocked. Here, get out of my way so I can see. There we go. But the incoming snowfall isn't enough to keep up with the outflows, that go through the dam. So to run the power, to meet the water needs of Southern California and all those people. So you kind of see the white walls there too, just like you do now kind of on Wickiup, although for an entirely different purpose. And it could be that in the middle of winter the Wickiup fills again. I know a lot of these reservoirs were created too to help kind of manage flood control for some of the lower level areas of the Willamette Valley and Oregon and whatnot. So a lot of times they will empty some of these reservoirs or get them close to empty near winter, so that if we have some heavy, wet, warm snow or water on top of snow that we know is going to be flooding the lowlands, you have some of these reservoirs up here that you can fill with water and kind of help keep some of the impact at lower in the valley or at a minimum. I don't know that people always appreciate all that. A lot of times the dams that are put in on these waterways or these reservoirs, yeah, they're man-made. It isn't natural. God didn't make them that way. But he gave us a brain to help ourselves on a lot of this. And yeah, I know there's some folks that are just they oppose it all for whatever reason, if it isn't just exactly how nature made or how God made it in the first place. We stayed, when we went over there, last Wednesday. We were there till Saturday. We stayed in a cabin. I think there's a little resort on South Twin Lake. It's just Twin Lakes. There's a couple small, they look like mud puddles compared to, Crane Prairie, which I just mentioned, or Wickiup Reservoir. I think South Twin, I mean, it's roughly 800 yards across, give or take, depending on what direction it is, and I think the maximum depth is about 50 feet, 51 feet. So a much smaller surface area for this lake, but a much greater depth, than Crane Prairie. But anyway, they just had a resort in there, and we rented this cabin. I always tease my kids and ask which one of them we can sell, to afford some of the exorbitant rates they charge at these. And the cabins are pretty rustic. And that cabin had more creaks and groans in it than I've heard in a long time. It had a loft kind of upstairs where a few of our kids slept, and wife and I were downstairs. It really kind of, as we were saying later when we left, it was made for warehousing people who are doing stuff in the outdoors. It really isn't designed for a lot of time to be spent inside, if you will. It did have a little kitchen. It had a stove, it had a microwave, but virtually no shelf space, no counter space, to cook anything decent. As a family, we're staying there, we kind of needed some of that, and so we just had to make do with what we had. I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining. And they got a refrigerator, freezer in there, but there's just not that much space. And even though I think the cabin would sleep 12 people, I mean, it's pretty good sized. They're upstairs, it's kind of an open loft, and I think there was 6 beds up there. 7, 8, 9, or maybe there was 8 beds. Yeah, 6 beds upstairs, and then there was 2 bedrooms down below, and one of the bedrooms had a queen bed in it, and the other had 2 queen beds in it. So in theory, I think you could put 12 people in the house. I think they would cap you at 10, but anyway, all that to say is, if you were going to have a meal in there, there was no big table where you could all sit down. You come in there, and there's a small family area, if you will, area to sit. They had a couple nice couches, if you will, and then dinky kitchen. They did have a place for, they had showers, in one shower, I shouldn't say plural, and a restroom, but every other bit of it was sleeping area. So we're not talking a huge cabin here. So pretty rustic, and we loved it. It was good to just be out there, and even though we were kind of in each other's space, if you will, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I love this steep hill. I think I've got a little dab over here to plant it yet. I'm going to head back over and get the top of it. When we take trips like this as a family, there's a lot of prep that goes into it, and then a lot of cleanup to do. And everybody knows this. I mean, anybody that's ever gone out and tried to do this, but I know I was commenting to my wife at one point that we took more junk in our family vehicle going just on a few day trip for this fishing trip than we took when we traveled across country, to the Midwest. And of course, she reminded me that in this case, we had to take every bit of our food, whereas when we head to the Midwest, went across country, a lot of it was we got food in restaurants, if you will, or we stayed with people that we knew who were kind enough to feed us a meal. Whereas here we had to do it all on our own. So, but it was just nice to get away. And even though a guy gets away, I know for me it's kind of more about getting some time, just that precious of all commodities, time to do things. And of course I couldn't make videos up there, but I pretty much take my laptop with me wherever we go. And even up there still was cell reception, just a teeny tiny bit. so I could even log into work, keep up on my emails, and take care of all that kind of stuff too, which I know, at least for my temperament, I know some people are able to just let it go and deal with it when they get back. It's less stressful for me to kind of try to keep up on it even while I'm gone. So it was nice to be able to do that. Had the laptop there where I could do it, did some modding. All of those things that we like to do when we actually have time to do them. And my boys, of course, out in the water fishing away like crazy. I think they had a pretty good luck. I think the longest of the fish that they had, and again, these were rainbow trout, was 22 inches. I think that was the largest one that I remember hearing about. Don't know how much they weighed. We came home with a number of fillets and whatnot. Now we'll just have to figure out when to eat them. And I gotta say, not only am I not a fisherman, I'm not much of a fish eater either. And it's kind of funny. I don't think my sons are either, because a lot of times we can have all this good fish in the fridge or in the freezer, and it starts growing hair before we ever think to get to it. But hopefully we'll get to it here. The weather up there, I mean, like I kind of was mentioning earlier, it can kind of be hit and miss. You know, I remember years going up there where it was literally snow coming down. This time it was just cold rain, and that's probably the biggest part that turns me off of being outdoor in a boat floating around, trying to catch some fish. You're just out in the elements, and it's one thing if it's a sunny day or whatever, but at this time you really had to love being out there, you know, if you were going to do it. Because I tell you what, they got hosed off one of those days. They got hosed off really good. So thank you, no, I will stay in the cabin and stay dry. You know, it's always interesting going to these cabins too. You start thinking of ways you might like it better, or if you could improve the cabin, what are things you would do. Of course, all these things to be added with tremendous cost if it were ever to be done, but generally more space, right? Not necessarily a bigger kitchen, but maybe just more counter space, if you will. The ability to sit there as a family at the table would have been nice. But even without all of that, when I think of a cabin in the woods, one of the things that comes readily to mind is the fireplace. This one didn't have any fireplace. Now, granted, they're not open in the winter. You know, I think they close kind of the middle of October each year. So they're really at the tail end of summer. They don't. Some of them are open up here in the Cascade Lakes in the winter, but I don't think this location is, or the Twin Lake Resort shuts down. So maybe they figure they don't need it. But I know the last time we were here, we had a less expensive cabin, and it had a fireplace in it. So go figure. Twin Lakes, by the way, where we stayed, is maybe, 6-7 miles from Crane Prairie. Maybe not even that. It's very close. And the cabins there are of higher quality than they are at Crane Prairie. They do have some cabins there, but they're just not as nice. And up in the mountains, I mean, it is hit and miss. You know, you can get some nasty cabins to stay in and really have to grit your teeth staying there. And when I say grit your teeth, I mean, I remember one as a kid. I think this was on a Lowry Lake. My mom, maybe one of my sisters or siblings, got sick on a fishing trip, and so my dad ended up getting a cabin. I think we were just in the tent at the time, but he opted to get a cabin to kind of help a little bit. I mean, when you have kids and your wife throwing up, I think he wanted to try to help with that however he could. So, but I'm not sure he did. I mean, the cabin that they got was infested with mice. It just reeked in there. And so, like in the middle of the night, when you hear little rustles here and there, it's like, ew, what is hiding in these blankets I'm sleeping in? It's like, am I in a nest of cockroaches? Or is a mouse going to come eat my toes. Oh, just all those kind of good things. And in some ways, when you hear that, being in a cabin may be more roughing it than even being in a tent, depending on the circumstances. But you just wonder about some of these lakes, or at least I do. You know, you look at it, it looks like it's been the same forever. I'm almost positive they haven't even painted the place since I was a kid. I hope I'm wrong on that, but the color and everything looks identical to how it was when I was a kid, and we never would borrow stuff or rent it from the resort, you know, things like paddle boats. I mean, we just didn't do much of that as a family, but I would bet money that a lot of what they have there, whether chairs, boats, picnic tables, there goes the timer, it's probably all still carried over from years and years ago, and they just keep using it, and they'll use it until someone sinks and dies with it, probably. And really, even when they charge us what seems exorbitant rates, when you run the math, they're not making that much up there. I know this particular resort we went to is under new management, probably because the old management failed, maybe. I really don't know. It's gotta be hard to turn a buck out there. There's so much competition, so many lakes that people could go to, or other resorts. And you can tell they aren't full all the time. They got the same old weekend, weekday problem that any of these places would have. We probably helped them as much as anything, you know, by being there during the week versus just coming on a weekend. I know that's why a lot of times they will charge even different rates on weekends versus weekdays. But anyway, we enjoyed it. I'm just curious about lots of things, and I guess I'm just thankful there are some people out there that come listen and share in some of my my own musings, or maybe you just come to see Gelvin Valley as we go back and forth planting our fields and try to get through to get ready for another harvest. So I think the timer went. I'm gonna sign off the episode here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.